guys, Mama Starfox here. And like I said, this is my part 2 to my miscarriage story from back in 2014. If you haven't seen the first part, just look back at my vlogs and it should be there. Where I was at, explained what happened during my miscarriage, and I mentioned how there was about how my mom said some things, and she also said to me, everything happens for a reason. And at the time, I didn't appreciate it. At the time, I didn't realize what that meant. I was just so angry at the world and angry at God for making me go through that pain and for taking my baby. But then I realized after I started healing, though I haven't completely healed emotionally, obviously, I remember thinking about what situation I was in at the time, and I didn't really realize how right my mom was when she said that until I was pregnant with my son. And he came at a time when I was in my last year of nursing school. I was pregnant with him, and it was at a time that I was ready to quit. I was so stressed and so I was doing well in school, but it was just, I was so overwhelmed and didn't know if this is what I was going to do and everything, and dealing with my anxiety and depression that I didn't yet get checked out for and everything. And he came at a time when I really needed that encouragement. And so because I was pregnant with him, though I was anxious through the whole thing, and I'll explain that in another vlog about my pregnancy with my son and my daughter and how different they were and all that, but on the basis of everything happens for a reason, he came at a time that I really needed the strength and encouragement. Being pregnant with him and knowing I need to provide for my baby and I need to learn everything I can about pregnancy and things to watch out for and all that stuff. And at that time, I already took the OBS course, or I was in the OBS course, and so that really helped. And my experience helped me with studying and helped me with connecting with my patients, because I was in clinical for OBS at the time that I found out. So yeah, I'll explain my whole pregnancy story with my son in another vlog. But after realizing that, I looked back and realized if I said to my parents when I was pregnant the first time that I was going to keep going through school, but after I had my son and I struggled, I was doing well, and I managed to finish my last year, but having to go through 3 years of school after having a baby, I probably wouldn't have done it. Would have been, because it was so hard to leave my son and go to school, and it was so hard to come home and try to get work done, and the only reason I could was because I was already through 3 years and already figured out how to do my studying patterns, like what worked for me. Like I would make questions for myself as if testing myself, and make tests for myself to do, and practicing, and having to be able to do that in the first 3 years, which were really important years. 4th year is really important, but it was a lot. I knew a lot from the last 3 years, so it was easier than it would have been if I had to go all through those years with a child. So I did realize that maybe that loss there was a reason, no matter, though I'm still very saddened and depressed and angry about what happened, I know that I try to keep telling myself that it wasn't the right time, and the universe or God, whatever you believe in, that knew that it wasn't the right time for me. And it also gave me not really a desired, but a good experience. Not a desired or good experience, but it gave me that connection that I could have with patients who have lost babies, and I understood how they felt and where they came from, and I could explain to them things and talk to them, and so it did help me in a lot of ways. And knowing what I knew after my miscarriage and all that, really, it hindered but helped me with my son, with my pregnancy with my son. I avoided so many foods. I was looking up every single thing that I could, and I was avoiding cats like crazy. Like, I was hardly at my house because my parents had a cat, because I wanted to avoid cat litter. As many moms would know, you have to avoid cat litter. And I was so paranoid about everything, and it was because of that miscarriage that I was like that. And so, and I do truly believe that my first baby picked Catherine, and I believe in that type of thing, like reincarnation and heaven and all that. And I truly believe that she was watching over, he or she, I keep saying she, as I just had that feeling that she was she. And I feel like my first baby's watching over me and Catherine and Autumn, and she handpicked them in the time I needed. Because they were all 2 years apart from each other. 2014, then 2016, and then 2018. So that's kind of a weird coincidence. And it was all at the same time, too. They were all supposed to be born around October, though Autumn ended up being September. My first baby was supposed to be the first week of November, and Catherine was the first week of October. Sorry for that up close thing. I had to itch my face. But yeah, and as painful as it was to admit that my mother was right, I had to look at it that way. Otherwise, I would have been a mess, continuing mess. And my son was my saving grace, though, after those 2 years. And when I had him, as panicked as I was during my whole pregnancy, he was such a blessing to have. I know, Bubby. Did you lose? What happened? Did you drop one? Mama will get it in a minute once Sissy wakes up. She has to sleep on my arm. She will hardly sleep anywhere else. I put her down and she's like wide awake and screaming at me like, why did you drop me? Why did you put me down? I know, baby. But yeah, and I want to say, for those 2 years, I often looked up things like what could cause a miscarriage, and though people kept telling me to not do that and that it wasn't my fault, I constantly thought it was my fault. I was convinced that, because I was craving ice caps. I had ice caps every day, and I was in university, so I needed something to wake me up so I could drive and I could study and everything. So I was constantly drinking ice caps and all these different types of foods that I ended up avoiding with my son. But then, and so I blamed myself. I thought that was the problem. I thought I did that. And the fact that I was still taking my birth control before I knew I was pregnant, I thought that was the cause. And all these different things that I've looked up and I blamed on myself. But it wasn't that. Because I knew with my daughter, I decided, because I remember avoiding everything with my son and annoying the hell out of my boyfriend by getting him to look up stuff. The only thing I avoided when I was pregnant with her was, what was it? Those certain cheeses and high mercury fish. That was it. But I still had tuna, and I still had cold cuts. I still lived at my parents' house, and was around the cat all the time. I did not touch the cat litter. That's a big thing. Do not, because you do not want to get toxoplasmosis from that. So yeah, and I drank caffeinated drinks a lot, and she came perfectly healthy and grew just as she should be. And so after, I blamed myself for years and years, even when I was pregnant with my son, because I avoided so many things, like almost starving myself a lot because I was so worried. And then when I had her, like when I was pregnant with her, it made me finally realize that it wasn't my fault. It's a random thing that happens, and we don't know why it happens most of the time, but it's never your fault. And it took me a long time to figure that out, but I know, baby, what's happened? Okay, 1 second. But yeah, just to recap, my advice for the main things to avoid during pregnancy is certain cheeses. You can look it up. There's a long list that I cannot remember, but I mainly just stuck to like mozzarella, marble, cheddar, and like Parmesan, because it's like the basic cheeses I stuck to just to be safe. And they say to avoid cold cuts, and I get that. You don't want to get sick, but I had them through my whole pregnancy and I was fine. It's just make sure that you don't overdo it, and you make sure that it's stored at the proper temperature and all that stuff. And you do have to don't overdo it with the caffeine. Obviously for everyone's health, not even when you're pregnant either. Like, you should also, when you're not pregnant, avoid as much caffeine as possible. And with my breastfeeding too, I had to avoid too much caffeine because it would hurt her stomach. I noticed, like, it made her very gassy. But that's also another subject for another vlog. But right now for pregnancy stuff, yeah, I'd avoid too much caffeine. Avoid aspartame and sucralose. Look for those, and that's another thing you should avoid in your regular diet too, not just when you're pregnant. And what was the other thing I was trying to think? Oh, high mercury fish, and not cooked fish. Everything has to be cooked. Do not have raw eggs, because you don't want to get sick when you're pregnant, and because you never know what can cross that placental barrier. And certain medications you gotta watch for. Always ask your doctor or your OBGYN what you can have and what you can't have. Tylenol was the main thing that I could have. And if I had a cold or anything, I tried to go for more natural remedies, like just increasing your fluid intake and having a lot of orange juice and having an air humidifier and stuff, and that got me through. But if you ever need to know, ask your pharmacist, ask your doctor, OBGYN, whoever, medical professional that you are in contact with, about medications. And make sure to take vitamins, your prenatal vitamins. That was a big thing that I kept on, because I knew in the run of a day when I was pregnant, like I didn't get all the nutrients that I needed. I obviously knew that. And you need that extra folic acid in your diet as well. Yeah, and obviously avoid alcohol and smoking. That's a that's a big obvious thing, but it is important. I also blame myself for my miscarriage with that, because before I knew I was pregnant, I went out drinking. But that happened with my daughter too. Before I found out I was pregnant, I would have been in the very, very early weeks, before the month was over and I realized my period didn't come, that I was drinking, and so she came out fine. But just don't try to avoid it. If you're trying to get pregnant, or if you know your period's late, take a test and before you decide to go out drinking, because it can very much affect your baby. Though my grandmother back in the day, before they knew that, probably drank like a freaking sailor when she was pregnant with my father. But it's always good to avoid that. And yeah, I was trying to think of what kind of cheese. I just remembered it's unpasteurized cheese. That I was trying to remember how to say that. But yeah. But I'll have other videos talking about my pregnancies and what I did with both, because they were polar opposites for pregnancies and everything. So I'll put on that subject my next few vlogs. But you guys have a good day. Mama Star Fox out.